Look at a fractured human femur from 60,000 years ago, resting on the cold metal of an examination table. Now look at the fossilized remnants of a water hemlock root, found perfectly preserved inches from the jawbone. We view this artifact as a prehistoric tragedy, a simple, unfortunate mistake. It was not a mistake. It was a highly specific data point, a brutal, agonizing data point in the most ruthless scientific experiment ever conducted in the history of this planet. The laboratory was the savage Earth. The subjects were our direct ancestors. The cost of failure was instant erasure from the genetic pool. You sit in a climate, controlled room. You consume an almond, a tomato, a mushroom. You do not fear the bite. You trust the agricultural system. You trust the barcode printed on the plastic. But how was that invisible shield of trust forged? How did the first bipedal hominids look at a dense, terrifyingly chaotic forest? A visual canvas of 10,000 variations of green leaves, bright berries, and fibrous roots, and separate the sustenance from the venom. How did they know which vibrant fruit would sustain the beating hearts of their children, and which would cause their throats to rapidly swell shut, their vision to blur into darkness, and their bodies to violently expel thick, dark red blood onto the cavern floor? We comfort ourselves constantly with the romanticized myth of primal instinct. We imagine early humans possessing a mystical, innate connection to the earth, a biological sixth sense that gracefully whispered warnings into their ears before danger struck. Is that what you genuinely think happened? Do you truly believe a benevolent intuition guided their reaching hands away from the nightshade? It did not. Nature does not whisper warnings. Nature executes its victims in total silence. To properly understand the brutal architecture of our species' survival, we must zoom out and observe the grand, merciless mechanics of human evolution, and then suddenly zoom in on the specific, horrifying moments of discovery. We must dissect the exact methodology of their survival. This was a complex, generational process written entirely in casualties, a living database constructed from rotting flesh and shattered bones. The first phase, the Forager's Roulette. Focus your mind on a single, isolated tribe in the late Pleistocene. A bitter glacial winter has locked their hunting valley in an impenetrable sheet of ice. The megafauna have migrated thousands of miles away. The dried meat reserves are completely depleted. Starvation is no longer an abstract concept. It is a physical, living parasite violently gnawing at the lining of their empty stomachs. The midday sun briefly thaws the snow just enough to reveal an unfamiliar, pale root system deeply embedded beneath the permafrost. It looks similar to the wild carrots they safely consumed in the spring. It smells faintly of rich soil and sugar. Who willingly takes the first bite? There was no noble, heroic sacrifice. There was only raw, desperate hunger. The weakest member of the tribe? Or perhaps simply the most ravenous? Uncontrollably consumes the pale root. The rest of the tribe waits in total silence. They watch. They observe the chosen subject with the incredibly cold, calculating eyes of involuntary, primitive scientist. They wait to see if the subject's pupils rapidly dilate in panic. They wait to see if the subject's muscles begin to violently convulse against the cavern wall. They wait to see if the subject vomits a horrifying sludge of dark red fluid heavily mixed with stomach bile. If the subject miraculously survives the frozen night, the root is permanently classified as vital food. If the subject dies screaming in agony, the route is classified as instant death. They ate. They suffered. They categorized. They adapted. But how could a species track this immense volume of data over countless generations? A single tragic death is merely an anecdote. A consistent pattern of horrifying deaths is the birth of science. The second phase, the intricate anatomy of bitterness. Evolution did grant us one crude, imperfect physical defense mechanism, the sense of taste. On a microscopic level, our tongues developed a targeted hyper. Sensitivity to complex alkaloids. Alkaloids are the invisible chemical weapons of the botanical world. They are neurotoxins meticulously produced by plants to paralyze the insects and mammals that dare to consume their leaves. To the sensitive human tongue, the presence of dangerous alkaloids registers as intensely bitter when a desperate human bit into a toxic leaf. The bitter chemical signal instantly fired an electrical warning into the brainstem. Spit it out, reject it, purge the mouth. This involuntary physical reflex undeniably saved countless prehistoric lives. But was this system foolproof? Can any creature safely rely entirely on its basic senses when the botanical enemy is constantly mutating its chemical warfare? No. The plant kingdom is fundamentally deceptive. The incredibly deadly Amanita phalloides, commonly known as the death cap mushroom, does not taste remotely bitter. Survivors of its horrifying poison, interviewed before their organs completely necrotized, consistently reported that the lethal fungus tasted pleasant, sweet. Even relying on taste alone was an undeniable death sentence. The bitter warning was merely the very first, highly flawed filter. So, if raw instinct failed us completely, and our physical taste was so easily bypassed by sweet poisons, how did they successfully map the vast, invisible chemical minefield of the ancient forest? The third phase, the ruthless outsourcing of lethal risk. Zoom out once again from the isolated human tribe and look broadly at the surrounding, complex ecosystem. The gray wolves, the massive brown bears, the tiny, scurrying rodents. Early humans were highly effective apex predators, but they were also the absolute apex observers. They obsessively watched the wild animals. If a troop of frantic macaques stripped a wild berry bush bare and suffered no ill physical effects, the observant humans took precise mental note. If a wild boar dug up a highly specific fungus and aggressively consumed it without dying, the humans copied the behavior. They actively used the entire wild animal kingdom as their involuntary preliminary tasting panel. They ruthlessly outsourced the lethal risk of discovery to the diverse creatures living around them. But right here lies the fatal flaw in passive observation: extreme biological incompatibility. A common bird can aggressively gorge on the vibrant berries of the belladonna plant with absolute impunity. Their unique avian digestive tracts completely neutralize the deadly poison before it enters their bloodstream. If a hungry human child closely watches the bird, logically assumes the vibrant berry is perfectly safe, and consumes a small handful, that innocent child will be dead and cold before the sun sets over the horizon. Did they eventually notice this horrifying discrepancy? Did they slowly realize that the deer's complex stomachs was a fundamentally different chemical furnace than their own fragile biology? Yes, through a terribly slow, agonizing accumulation of senseless tragedies, every fatal miscalculation left a rotting body. Every rotting body was a harsh lesson. permanently burned into the collective memory of the entire tribe. Now, firmly zoom back out to the present modern era. We confidently wander through the brightly lit aisles of a supermarket, stripped of the heavy existential dread that aggressively defined our ancestors' relationship with food. Every safe crop you blindly consume today is an invisible monument to a forgotten ancestor who painfully choked on their own thick, dark red blood in the freezing mud. We have arrogantly forgotten the sharp, bitter taste of actual survival. We foolishly believe we have entirely conquered the sprawling botanical world. We believe the biological war is over, but if the fragile global supply chains violently collapse tomorrow, and you suddenly find yourself standing completely alone before a dense, terrifyingly chaotic forest of 10,000 variations of green, staring blindly at a cluster of strange, unfamiliar berries, how many of your own family members will you have to silently watch violently die before you finally remember how to learn again